So, ladies and gentlemen, it's Modern Investing on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today guests are Dr. Milan Somberg. Welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. And Pod TV producer Mark Lee. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Glad to have this conversation. Always good to talk to you, Sasha.
Yeah, you might have some questions that you'd like to discuss. So today is everybody waiting for a decision of Fed. What to do about interest rates? I think his speech starts at 2 o'clock or so. So in a couple of hours we'll know everybody's opinion. Most of the people, at least, that interest rates will remain the same. It's not a question of that. It's a question of his commentaries, what he's going to say, that interest rates will remain the same for foreseeable future, or he will start tightening them and will take half a point or maybe even whole point up, and that will kill the market for foreseeable future. Or maybe he'll say that not now, but sometime later, interest rates may come down. Okay, we'll see. Which scenario is most likely? Milan, what do you think about this?
Well, interest rates have an immediate impact on the stock market. And, and I would like to talk for a minute about the money illusion. Money illusion is a nominal dollar terms are not real terms. That is, a dollar today will buy more than a dollar will buy in the future. And how much more depends on the rate of inflation. So despite all the rise in the market in the last year or so, since if you factor in the inflation, if you factor in the money illusion, the market really hasn't gone anywhere since 2021. So for long-term investors who buy and hold stocks through low-cost index funds, that's hardly a big deal. The best exchange-traded fund, which tracks the S&P 500, is SPY. Is the largest, the oldest, has the narrowest bid-ask spread. So long-term investors buying that, realizing that it will fluctuate as much as 30% in 1 year, are going to be all right as long as they don't put money into the market, which they're going to need in the next few years. That's a very safe way to go. It's always it's always possible to do better than the market by putting all your money into the best performing stock, which is what you have done with NVIDIA, Sasha.
Right.
So risk takers who went into NVIDIA, for example, gained 82.5% for the first quarter, and 235% over the last 12 months. Well, why stop there? You can do even better by buying an exchange-traded fund that uses leverage and derivatives and aims to produce double that return, double the return of NVIDIA stock. So now they did even better in the first quarter with a gain of 205%. But
what fund you're talking about?
An exchange-traded fund which uses leverage and derivatives with a single stock like NVIDIA.
What's the name of it?
I can't think of any. It's easy to find out on the internet. Just look for ETFs holding NVIDIA. Now, if NVIDIA falls for an extended stretch, like every other stock in history has done, the losses will be staggering. So
unless you're hedging your position with options. If you're selling covered calls, for example, the premiums are there even now, astronomical, still are. And then you're protecting your position.
Let's see. What did the market do today? The market is supposed to go up on Wednesdays, but I don't think that it did today.
Well, it's Fed's meeting yesterday and today. So until it will be out of the way, there will be no action in stocks unless Dow Jones is up about 100 points, but that's not a big deal. And everybody's waiting until Fed's meeting will be out of the way.
That's true, Sasha. A question for you, and I've asked this before. The Dow Jones represents the market as a whole, even though it only includes, I think, 30 stocks.
Yep.
Yeah, the SPY, which tracks the S&P 500, which is 500 stocks, are really very similar in their description of the market. Yet today, SPY is down while Dow Jones average is up. What does that mean, really?
Well, that's very easy because Dow Jones doesn't have heavy high-tech component as
Right.
500.
Yeah.
That's the only reason.
Yeah, so what we tell our members, Monday Morning Millionaires, we have about 300 members. We tell them that security selection and market timing make no material contribution to returns. That's according to David Svensson.
What does?
Hmm?
A question, what does? That doesn't. Then what does?
Equaling the market has historically for more than 100 years, equaling the U.S. market has produced an inflation-adjusted return of 6.2%, 6.2, somewhere there, inflation-adjusted. Now, most advisors advise and recommend that people withdraw 4% from their portfolio to live on. And if it's making a guaranteed based on history with fluctuations, 6.25%, it's a very safe way to go. The important thing to do, though, is to make sure that money that we're going to need in the near future, year 2, 3, doesn't belong in the market. You know what you're going to need to pay your municipal taxes, and you know how much you're going to need more or less for groceries and that kind of stuff. That does not belong in the market. We need to exclude that from immediate market investment and put all our assets, the ones that we will not need in the next year or 2 or 3, put them in exchange traded fund which tracks the S&P 500. It's a very safe way to go, and that's what we advise to our investors. Now you have to ask, what about outliers, people who have done better than the market, the investment wizards, the market wizards have done better? There are not many market wizards. I think that you are one, Sasha, but that sure doesn't apply to most people. And
Thanks.
in addition to the fact that you can do better than the market if you're a Mozart of the stock market, if you're a market wizard, in addition to that, you have to spend a lot of time at it, which is okay if you enjoy that. And absolutely. Like I keep saying, if you can break even and have a good time, don't ask for more. And this will certainly allow you to do better than break even. Yeah, Mark, you were going to comment?
Yeah, actually a question for both you and Sasha, and it's actually something we've talked about before on this show, and we've talked about on other shows, but there is a major celebrity that has followed this new trend that is out there, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, but many people are aware of the actor Jeff Goldblum. He's been involved in a lot of things, including Jurassic Park and a number of other things, but he is one of the latest celebrity parents that has come out and declared that he will not be allowing his children to rely on his money when they get older and everything. So he has come out there and said that he does not want his his kids to get the money. As a matter of fact, he says it's important to teach kids, I'm not going to do it for you, and you're not going to want me to do it for you. So he said to one of his coaches, you've got to row your own boat. And that's the advice that he's given to his kids and everything. And he does have kids from a relationship, and he is in his early 70s and everything. But I just wondered your thought about this new notion, because I do know there's some kids out there that are going like, hey, that's the money I was expecting to get, was the money from my parents or those that are generations ahead. But apparently Mr. Goldblum is one of several celebrity parents that is offering this advice. And he's saying that many folks, not just celebrities, should be doing this and not just having their kids get their money and everything. But what is your thoughts about this notion of them having to row their own boats?
Totally makes sense. Yeah, you should stand on your own 2 feet. I think that Warren Buffett has given enough money to his children to buy a house. and that's all. The rest they have to earn themselves, and that's really the best way to go through life, is to know how to hunt rather than expect somebody to hunt for you.
Actually, the house is some kind of a trap, because now they have to worry about paying taxes and the maintenance and all kind of things. So they are actually forced to look for a job or business or something like that. They cannot just live in a house and enjoy themselves. It's impossible. On the other hand, I have friends who have kid. Quite a capable guy. He's over 60 now, and he still lives in parents' house because it's economically it makes a lot of sense for him, because he doesn't have to worry about any overhead, and he has everything what he needs, and maybe he's happier than Warren Buffett kid who has to worry about paying all this.
Sasha, what you're saying is actually true. We're having a meeting in our community here in Collingwood. The mayor will be present, and so will the builders and so on, to talk about the housing crisis that really does exist, particularly in tourist areas like Collingwood is, where I live, and you have that happening in Aspen and in Vail and Breckenridge, all these places which are tourist areas. People who bought their houses there before they became a tourist area are doing all right. But people who need to buy now can't do it. So they live away and they drive an hour or two to get to work at one of these resorts. But a couple of issues that are really worth examining is one, that the average house today is double the size of the house of a generation ago.
But not only that, but one of the things, and there's a very popular TikTok video that's out there right now. There's a content creator, ironically, and maybe we'll try to get her on the network from North Carolina and everything, named Samantha Barker, and she has joined millions of other Americans who are finding that buying a home is a money pit. So she was thinking that she was going to get herself into this wonderful situation, and she's bought a cheap house here in North Carolina, and then she said that she could so she could live below her means, and she said that financially ruined her. So she explained on this TikTok how buying a cheap house in North Carolina financially ruined her. She explained that last summer she bought her first house, a ranch-style 1940s home in central North Carolina, so that's actually around here, and the house was everything she wanted and more, but it needed tons of work once she moved in, and despite the work that she had to do and everything, Barker had an idea of what she was going into, was an extremely prepared for it, but she did everything right, including saving up her money and participating in a down payment assistance program to have more money for renovations and buying a cheap house so she could live below her means and put more money into her house. But apparently this TikTok video is saying that a lot of things went wrong. The inspector failed her. The sailor didn't disclose everything. And now it's like 80% of the house had dry rot and water damage that weren't mentioned. So it looks like she got a whole trap that she did not realize that she was getting into in that space.
Do you have any idea, Mark, how large the house is? How many square feet?
I'm going to try to find out. I know it's a ranch house, and ranch houses are usually pretty decent sizes and everything, because one of the articles, or one of the things she said in her TikTok, is that her HVAC and furnace completely went out the first week she moved in, and she had to spend $25,000 to replace all the electrical ductwork, and cost her another $15,000 for a foundation, and she took out a personal loan to handle the water damage. So there was water damage as well. So I'm trying to find out if they've got the actual figures as to the house and everything. But according to Zillow, consumer housing trends, the median prospective home buyer had only $29,000 in savings, checking, investments, and retirement accounts, which amounts to only 8% of the typical cost of a house and everything. So a lot of people probably don't have enough money for the house and all in that space.
Two things. The banks, which are in the business of lending out money, want to lend you as much as possible safely for them. So they figure out what percentage of your income could go to housing. They want you to borrow as much as possible in a way that's risk-free for the banks. So now the size of the house, really, there are two issues. One is the size of the house, which I mentioned earlier. The average house today is twice as large as the one in our previous generation. people aren't twice as happy because of it. They are perfectly happy growing up in one house with 4 or 5 residents, their parents and 3 children, and 1 bathroom. Today you have lots of houses with 2 people living in there with 4 bathrooms. That's very common. Larger houses are very common. And the other issue is when a builder puts the shovel in the ground to start the basement or the foundation for the house, he is already half done. And everything that precedes that shovel in the ground is paperwork related to regulations. And that really is something that we ought to be able to simplify. So that the primary objective of any bureaucracy is to perpetuate the bureaucracy, and everything else is secondary. And so the people who run these regulations want to perpetuate their activity. So getting that simplified and rationalized is not going to be easy, but it ought to be a requirement, because all that regulations connected with house construction is much too much of it in existence that we can do.
You know that in Europe, most of the people in any country, they pay rent. They don't buy properties. They leave a rent.
That's
Whatever is affordable in areas that they would like to choose, whether it's close to schools or their work or whatever it might be. And there is no stigma attached to pay rent. There are a lot of wealthy people in Europe who pay rent. For example, in our society, it's encouraged that it's a part of American dream to own the house. So people are struggling to own the house, to somehow collect down payment, and therefore their life is not nearly as happy as in Europe, where people.
You're right, Sasha. The average Swiss is wealthier than the average Canadian,
Of course.
and the average Swiss does not own a house.
They don't need to.
Yeah.
They can choose a nice house or apartment in an area where they would like to choose, and they don't suffer psychologically that they rent instead of owning it. They wouldn't even understand what we're talking about here in North America. Everyone has to own.
You're right. That's a psychological thing. That's a psychological thing. Yeah.
It's definitely a psychological thing. But one of the other things that happens psychologically is that there is this notion, and there was an article, I think, in Yahoo Finance about the shrinking middle class. So as y'all are in the investment space, and I don't know if it's shrinking around the rest of the world, but a lot of times when people think about finance and investment in the U.S., they talk about how there is a growing amount of people in the elite and definitely a growing amount of the poor, but there is a shrinking middle class. As a matter of fact, that article in Yahoo Finance talked about the fact that the middle class of the 80s is not the same in terms of numbers as the middle class of today, because it's less people that are considered middle class and now and everything. As a matter of fact, they said there was a drop from 61% that would be considered middle class in the early 1970s to 50% 2 years ago, and the figures have held steady. But there are people that are always talking about this notion that the middle class is seriously shrinking and everything. But is that part of what's going on as well? Is that a lot of the people are trying to live that dream life that you were just talking about, and maybe they don't have the resources to be in the middle class? Because a Pew 2022 study showed a bump of 14% to 21% of Americans in the upper income tier over the same kind of period, and the percentage of the Americans in the lower income increased from 25 to 29%. So definitely there seems to be a shrinking middle class and everything.
Yeah, that's true, Mark. And many middle class people are getting higher wages, but lower purchasing power because of inflation. You know that if the government taxed your income at 100%, you would either leave the country or find a way to cheat. There's no other way to survive. Now, if the market is going up 2% during an inflationary period of 2%, that's exactly the same as having 100% taxation. Exactly the same. Yet it doesn't seem that way. So this is another example of the money illusion, which a lot of people are victimized.
Well, I think it's worse than that, because let's see, you get 2% raise, but your cost of living went up 2%. Okay, so that one equalizes, but you still have to pay taxes. You see, so after tax, income will keep shrinking. There is not even parity. It will just keep shrinking. So the middle class, Mark, you are absolutely correct, it's going down. But you see, the problem is that there is a radicalization of young people. Look at what's happened in universities, campuses. So I understand, when we discussed earlier today on another program, I understand, for example, when blacks were fighting for their rights, they were born in the United States, they live in the United States, and they fight for their rights to have a better life, equal opportunities, so on. That's understandable. I even understand partially the recent Black Lives Matter movement. Again, regardless of real issues there, but at least, again, they were born, a lot of those people, in this country, and they're fighting for their rights. Now, when we're talking about today's students' movement, and it's around the world, it's not just a United States phenomenon. It's in Canada as well, to lesser extent in the United States. But the university.
Let me interrupt you here to
Yeah.
ask you about what kind of students. When I was in school studying dentistry, we had laboratories on Saturdays. We had 50 or 60 hours of lectures in laboratories a week. We didn't have time to protest. And when you take a look at people who are protesting, they're usually art students who have 16 hours of lectures a week.
But Milan, I when majored, and I could told Sasha on the earlier show that he's referring to and everything. When I was in school in the 80s, there were a number of people that were concerned about human rights issues, and they didn't have to be issues from their own country and all along those lines. And there were people like myself that were protesting things that were taking place in other parts of the world because they felt that it was a way for them to express their voice and to be heard for issues that they felt were important to be talking about and everything, whether that was African liberation or whether that was things that were going on in Europe. Because yes, there were some protests that were about some of the oppressions that were going on in Eastern Europe and all in that space and everything. So I think that some of these students are not just art students, because like I said, yes, I was a journalism and a poli-sci minor, but I know some people that were very much engaged, including some lawyers and business folks, even in the 80s, that chose to be on the humanitarian or the human rights sides of a protest. So, and yes, I know people that were going to school to either get whatever degree they were getting. And I know some people that were going to find their spouses, and I know some people that were going to school because they wanted to party. So yes, people go to school for different reasons, and there are folks that are there that have some sort of convictions, and I'm not saying that these people don't have convictions. But
Mark, you just said that students are going to school for different reasons. What would be other reasons than to have knowledge, experience, and learn something? What are those?
I mean, I just told you, a lot of people go to college because they want to discover themselves. That's part of the thing that a lot of young people go to escape or leave their parents, is that they're trying to find their identity. And part of finding your identity is finding your belief system. And if you have a belief system, and sometimes they're even, because I don't know if you know this, but Marquette is a Jesuit university and all along those lines. So that's my minor, and I'm not overly religious, but my minor, as far as I'm concerned, or a secondary minor, was religious education, because Marquette required about 21 hours of theology and philosophy. They didn't care whether you were a Catholic or not. That was just part of the requirement, because that is the nature of that university. I knew that going in there and everything.
Students can study anything what they choose. What they cannot do is to disrupt public order. They cannot bully the other, for example, in Columbia University, Jewish children who pay the money to attend university, and they are told to stay home. They cannot attend university for which they paid the money.
And there have been people that have been bullied on the other side as well. Like I said, I mean, the bullying can be on
Mark,
both sides. There are some Muslim students that have been bullied as well.
Side is not right as well. Okay, you have a point, Mark. You got it. So the other side also breaking the law, that they're disrupting the process. If that's true, what you're saying, I hope you're saying the truth. So this has to be condemned. But also all this little tent city where they put the tents. Now, what strikes me is those.
But I mean, like, but Sasha, as I said before, Sasha, as I said before,
excuse me, can I
but look at the historically, look at history.
Can I continue? Thank you so much.
Yes. No, but I was gonna say, but look at the history, because even if you look at civil rights, those were students that decided to sit in. Those were students that decided to sit in, and they argued that was why they were making a change.
See you next week. Bye bye. See you next week. Bye bye, gentlemen. The program is finished for today. Bye bye, everybody.
Okay, well, like I said, I was just trying to make my point as well, but I guess he didn't want to hear that particular point. But we're getting to end as he wanted to end, and all in that space. So we're going to get on out of here.